Hi everyone, it's Maddie Brady. We're here to get real about mental health. Stay tuned for some great conversations with some very special guests. Hi everyone, welcome to the Get Real Show. We are here with Tom from Came to Believe Recovery. He's here to shake things up and speak about his program and why it is so successful, and really people are coming in not sober and leaving sober and staying sober. So thank you so much for coming, and I would love to start off by hearing a little bit about your background and how you ended up getting into all of this.
Well, thanks for having me. It's really exciting to be in any avenue where I can speak about recovery and being recovered, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. That will shake most people in the recovery world up, being recovered. But my story is really I am, and I do identify as a recovered alcoholic addict, not recovering. And I drank up till I was about 40 years old. And after a bunch of disaster and everything you could imagine that comes along with addiction and failure in every avenue of my life, I got to what they call that bottom, in that place where I had to do something. And I was introduced to the 12-step program, but the 12-step program, the way the founders had done it, the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, so the ones who wrote the big book, and those listeners who know what that is, that's the text of Alcoholics Anonymous where the program is. And I was taken through this process very quickly, which is not common today in recovery programs. There's things that take a long time. And I didn't know anything different. That was funny, right? Because I hadn't been introduced to going to meetings all the time and do this and do that. These people who had this line right back to the founders, and I'll talk about that in a minute, the people that actually wrote the book, they took me through and it just made so much sense. And I experienced this freedom like immediately, that the obsession to drink and drug left me very, very quickly. And then growth began immediately. And I've absolutely identified as recovered. So that took really about 4 months for me to really feel the promises of the program starting to come true. We went through the steps very quickly in about 2 days.
Wow.
And then I was working my 10, 11, and 12, not to get too deep into it, but that's how it was always designed to be run, is to this first 9 once, next 3 for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I went to hear you speak at an event to speak about sober spaces and all of that. And when I first heard you say recovered, I was quite shocked too, because you never hear that. So I was very intrigued right off the bat, and I've never heard of as well going through the steps so quickly. How do you feel like it got away from that? If that is the way it was originally designed to be, where do you think it started to stray?
Well, historically, they can you can trace it back to the 50s, the 40s and 50s, as the program moved and got wider spread into New York City, actually. As it moved away from the Akron area and came into New York City, there was an influence to be more inclusive. So the program was seen at some point to some people as being a little exclusive because of the spiritual side of it. And some felt that it needed to be more inclusive. So they began to go away from the spiritual element of it. And modern psychology started to take over too, and started to feed its way into this whole thing. And it began to get what we call watered down. And so the process got lengthened. The idea that meetings were the program was a big thing here in New York City. And we don't know where that ever came from. Because, guys, if you open the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the text, if you were handed it, knew nothing about it, nothing about anything, you handed you the book, you would never go to a meeting because it doesn't even instruct us on how to go to meetings. So it got off the rails with that in the 50s and then the 60s, where they were moving away from the original intent of moving through quickly.
And why do you feel like it went in the direction of being more anonymous? Sorry. I'm going to grab some water really quick.
Sure.
And we're back. how do you feel like it became more anonymous? Like, was it originally designed to be so secretive, or was that something implemented later as well?
Well, it was the secretive element of it is been misunderstood, and where it came from the beginning. It was really about being anonymous at work, and things, and just protecting your job from the stigma of addiction, especially back in the 30s and 40s. You know, people back then went to insane asylums.
Yeah.
And so they didn't know how to cure addiction back then. They would put you in insane asylums. So it really had its roots in those things. And then when the traditions were written, and later on they felt that it was very important that people had personal anonymity, went, kind of on steroids, which is a terrible pun to use in there, steroids. But and now it's just, you can't tell anybody anything. You can't say anything to anybody. And like I was saying before we went on, everybody knew I was a drunk when I drank. So I get sober and I don't want anybody to know.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
Now, they were worried too back then about money corrupting the program. And they thought that if they were public, especially at the level of press, radio, and television. So we're at press right now, radio or television. But personally, I can manage my own anonymity. So I'm talking for myself. So I can come in front of anybody, press, anywhere I want and talk about it. So this is where it got a little bit confused, is that they didn't want it to get to the level of too public. And here's where the trouble would come in. If a big star or a big movie star or a big public figure went out and said, I'm sober, I'm all of this, and I did it through this program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and then they relapsed. If that happened, it would really damage Alcoholics Anonymous. So they didn't want that kind of thing. That's all it was about. It was about public perception. Of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because obviously when that rule was implemented, it was a totally different time. And now that there is social media and different avenues to be able to do things like this, the rules are a little bit iffy because I never know myself. Like, I always get nervous because everyone I talk to has different views on it. Some people think this shouldn't be done at all. Others think there's a certain line, certain words you shouldn't mention. So it gets a little tricky, but when the rules were made, there weren't avenues like this. And I do feel like what we're getting away from is the stigma of being an alcoholic or being a recovered alcoholic. And that is the whole mission, is to try to get away from that stigma. But if we are being so secretive about it, maybe that's keeping the stigma alive because we don't realize how many people are actually in recovery.
We don't. And you're absolutely right. And if I'm not talking about it, I mean, I want every avenue like this, and then we want you to come on our Recovery Live. We do a live broadcast every week, and we talk about all of this. That there is recovery. It is possible. There isn't a stigma. You can go on in your life. You can be successful at things. People will still love you. People will still hire you. And now that wasn't the case, though, 30 or 40 years ago. Alcoholism and addiction had a whole different... it was the stigma, and you're right, it's removing today. There's much less of a stigma to it today than there used to be.
One thing I do hear occasionally, I feel like people that are not accepting of people in recovery, is that people are always scared someone's going to relapse, that hiring them as an employee or dating someone or being friends with someone, people are scared someone's going to relapse, when in reality, I feel like people in recovery are more present, more reliable, because we're actually working programs and we're not going to the bar or cutting out of work an hour early or going to get drinks. So it's very interesting because people have this fear all the time, I feel like, of people going to relapse. And I think that's a stigma that's hard to get away from. And there's nothing wrong with relapse, and many people have to go through that, but other people don't experience that, and normalizing that there are two routes and not every single person is on the brink of relapse at all times.
And I'm going to talk a couple of points about that, about being about that fear of somebody relapsing into drugs. What about what they do? That's not alcohol or drugs that make them a terrible employee that they might be engaging in. So it's not so clear cut about that. But Clarence Snyder, who was one of the first 40 members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the gentleman who took our founder through his steps, and is really where we got most of our, horse's mouth material about what they were doing. And Dr. Bob took him through the steps. He was in Akron. And in Akron, they had like a 93% success rate. He moved to St. Petersburg, Florida, and all these people were relapsing. And he was just appalled. He didn't know what was going on. Why were all these people relapsing? Because they weren't experiencing that in the Akron area when they were doing this. So here you got a bunch of people relapsing who aren't doing the program. So number one, I say, how do you prevent or reduce relapses is do what they did, and you might not relapse. And you are absolutely right. Somebody in recovery and trying to be in recovery, I would want to hire them because they're working a program. They're trying to identify things that are wrong with them. They're trying to identify what wasn't working in their life. And let me tell you, if they get into that, they're healthier than anyone else around them.
Yeah.
I have had to do a process in my life, go through a process that I continue to this day. I work my 10, 11, and 12. I wake up every day and I set my day on how I'm going to go forward. And at night I say, how'd I do today? Kind of. Where do I need to make adjustments and amends, and how can I do better? Who wouldn't want someone working for them that does that?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So I think today we want to break that too.
Yeah.
That you're, some employers still have an issue with the stigma of addiction. And I am, this is part of our movement. Maddie's just stopped that.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I think it's great. And certainly my employer obviously is okay with it, but I've heard people say it. And I've even heard people in recovery not want to date someone else in recovery because of the fear of relapse, which is jarring because they're actually working the steps and in recovery themselves. But that's the only stigma I really hear today is this fear from people from the outside and on the inside that others around them are going to relapse.
Well, the shame is there is so much relapse in the addiction world today that's a real fear. And this is why part of our movement is so important. We have an 80% success rate that we're tracking, which means permanent, sustainable sobriety. Not only that, getting lives back.
Yeah.
And we want to bring this recovery rate of the 30s and 40s back. It worked then.
Yeah.
It works now.
What do you think it is? Is it more intense? Is it more rigorous? Like, what is the component, do you think, that is making it really stick?
So it's really interesting because everybody says this to me. They say, you do this intensive part of the program. I go, like we're doing something different. We're not doing something different. We're doing what they were doing back then. Nobody had more than 18 months sobriety when this thing started.
Wow.
So this whole idea of it takes a year to do the steps, it was never part of the program when it was the most successful. So I say this often at retreats. Think about this. 12 steps, the 12-step process is in everything. You see it. It's bled into corporate trainings. It's bled into church programs. It's bled into psychology things. All around you see a 12-step process. So all the rehabs use a little bit of it. At some point, it must have worked really well for it to catch on.
Yeah.
So if it had a 20% success rate in the 30s or 25 even, would it have caught on like this?
Definitely
I think not.
Yeah.
Right? So it was so successful, really, the most successful thing that's ever been developed or recognized in addiction recovery. I say that boldly, but I believe I can back that nothing really has worked as well. There's some new things coming out today that are really helping in addiction. We're not the only way. I want to make sure that I don't want to come across that this is the only way. But they were doing it a certain way. It flows in. If you go through the steps, the way we do it, it naturally goes one to the other, and it actually works better when you move from one to the other. It's the way it was designed. So it's not that it's intense. It's that we're doing it the way they did it. Does it make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I initially pictured it when you described it like a boot camp, which I was intrigued where I want it to go immediately.
Yeah.
I still would love to go and try it, but I was picturing like a Marines boot camp type of thing. Is that what it looks like, or?
It's not. I mean, a Marine boot camp gets you, or any kind of boot camp gives you the basic skills and the knowledge to then go be perfect at it. But listen to this. Mm-hmm. And this is, I'm getting this now. When you leave Marine Corps boot camp, you're not a recruit anymore. You're not still working to be a Marine. You're a Marine. Mm. So when you finish the steps, you're not still recovering.
Yeah.
You're recovered. Mm-hmm. But you still got to work at it and train and get better. Yeah. But you're a Marine when you leave. You're not when you're in training, but you are when you leave. Yeah. So I use that against all the people who don't think about recovered versus recovery. Now listen, let's talk about this recovered for a minute. Okay. And then we'll go back. Yeah. Because sometimes we lose people. First of all, the book says on the first page, we are more than 100 men and women who have recovered. Mm-hmm. They called themselves recovered back then. To show others how we've recovered is the main objective of the book. That's in the forward to the first edition. Mm-hmm. And then to show people to find a power that will solve their problem is the main sub-object of the book. So this is what they were doing back then, guys. They called themselves recovered. The program is to show you how to recover and to solve your problem. So if your problem is solved, do you have it anymore? No. Isn't it right? So why wouldn't this be really encouraging to someone and want to move quickly through it? There's promises that come true. There's things in life. There's a connection. Yes, there's a spiritual connection. It's not a church, guys. And we can talk about that in a minute too, because we get pigeonholed into a evangelical, fundamental Christian box. Came to believe does sometimes. And that's not what we are. We are following what our founders did, which was followed a God, and he was the God of the Bible. But that leaves a lot of wide open for how you follow that God, how that God talks to you, where you worship or not worship, what church you do go to or you don't go to. But they called themselves recovered. So you cannot be recovered. So I wouldn't date someone who's recovering. Right? So there's the thing. So if I met you and you're going to meetings and you really hadn't addressed it and you hadn't been through your steps, you are subject to relapse. Yeah. I probably wouldn't date somebody like that. Interesting. Because they're not, for a lot of reasons, they're not okay. There's a part of their life that's not in process. So I would date someone who is recovered. And think about this. If you get diabetes, you have diabetes, and you change your diet, you lose weight, you exercise, and you now do not identify with diabetes anymore, right? You don't have it. Yeah. Would you say I'm still recovering with diabetes?
No, diabetic? You're recovered.
But you could get it again.
Yeah.
If you did it. Same thing. We're not saying that we're cured, which is what people also misinterpret. Recovered is different. It's a mindset. But it's a mindset that says, I dug out of this hole. I'm now dealing with life like everybody else from a recovered mindset. Alcoholics and addicts, our whole lives have been told that we're not good enough, we're not okay, we're not the same in this. And this is not true. We can get to a place where we start working a program that takes us to the next level, that fourth dimension of existence, and absolutely exist recovered from the obsession to use. It was a long diatribe I gave you there, but it was important.
It's super important. And do you get a lot of backlash though saying that? I imagine so.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Yeah, in meetings, we even tell people after retreats, careful when you go into meetings with that, because what happens is you'll turn somebody off. Yeah. So I have even gone to a meeting. I went to a meeting out in California a couple of years ago, and it was an early morning meeting with some tough, kind of rough gang in an inner city in Oroville, California, which is a very, there's a lot of addiction. Anyway, the gentleman who brought me said, careful with saying recovered. These guys aren't going to take that. They're going to nail you to a cross the minute you say it.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and said, I am Tom. I'm an alcoholic, which I'm not. That's so silly. Like, why would we say we're alcoholic? It sends me over the edge now. And I began to talk about what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And to him to talk about taking the steps. And I said, when you reach the 9th step, these promises that come true in the 9th step and in the 10th step, and it talks about the problem being solved, and it talks about it's the miracle of it, and it talks about us being relieved of this insanity and all this stuff. And I said, that's why sometimes I identify myself as recovered. Mm-hmm. So I slipped it in later.
Yeah.
But it went over better when I did it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, the recovered thing is a difficult hill to climb if you don't know how to do what I'm doing right now, is talk it through with people. And then a lot of times people say, all right, I understand. You mean, it's a mindset. Yeah, you could be not recovered.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I mean, when I first heard you say that was my reaction, that like, what is he talking about? But when you actually explain it, it does make sense. And, but honestly, I'm feeling both things, where everything you're taught is to not say that at all costs, that you're absolutely not recovered, you're in recovery. But then everything you say makes total sense. So it's a back and forth, where if you're taught one way and then you hear this, it is hard to find your footing. I would definitely have to do your program to experience.
And our program is just the program that they did.
Yeah.
They did not call themselves recovering back then. Mm-hmm. So that's that difference. We're not making a difference. We're bringing it back to what it was. If you do this and experience this, that's also, you could be in recovery. Mm-hmm. If you haven't gone through this process and had the spiritual awakening and done your 9th step and followed along and do your 10th and 11th on a daily basis and been honest on your 4th step, then they didn't promise anything, and neither do we. Mm-hmm. But if you do, we promise that you can live in a recovered state. Mm-hmm. It's what the whole purpose was to get to be recovered. It was never to be in this drudgery of recovering, where I need to go to a meeting every day. If you need a meeting to stay sober, there's something wrong. Mm. Yeah. It's not ever how it was. The meetings were the fellowship later, where we uplift each other and we share experience, strength, and hope, and we help each other in their 10, 11, and 12, and then we wait for the other newcomer to come. Mm-hmm. And then, there were no meetings at the beginning.
I did not.
There were no meetings. These guys didn't start in meetings. They started doing the steps.
When did the meetings start?
The meetings actually started later, when they had to have a place where everybody could gather, and where they could identify the people and then start taking them through the steps. When you came to a meeting initially back in the 30s in Akron, they didn't let you sit in a meeting until you did your steps. Mm-hmm. So you went and did the steps, and then you could join the meeting. And the meetings were husbands, wives, children, everybody.
Wow.
It was not this exclusive thing.
You brought your whole family.
Anybody came. And that's another big thing that was watered down in the 50s when the traditions came. Mm-hmm. The traditions talked about only alcoholics. Mm-hmm. So then NA had to come, and OA, and all the other A's. Mm-hmm. When it never had to be that way. The program works for all of the addictions and the family members. The family got sick together. The family gets well together.
Wow.
They have to be part of it.
Yeah. That's very, very interesting. I do feel like maybe there could be both, where sometimes people are uncomfortable to share and have honest shares with their family present. But then, that would be a great idea to still have those today, where they do the full family.
So what we do to address that very thing is, so we'll have Al-Anons, overeaters, gamblers, sex anonymous, and all these A's. And we all do the steps together, but then when we break out into small groups, we let the small groups be separate so that those different groups can identify. Because I don't really have an Al-Anon story. Mm-hmm. So it's harder for me to identify with what an Al-Anon dealt with the addict who lied to them all the time. And it was so frustrating, and they couldn't control, and because that's their thing, CODA thing.
Yes.
That is a thing. Mm-hmm. And the overeaters. When I eat sugar, I don't eat sugar because of fitness and health, but I don't have that same thing. So it's not that I don't understand the background of it, that the solution comes from doing the steps, but the identification of how they felt and what happened, I don't have. So we separate out. So we do address it.
Okay.
We separate all those out for that. Then we come back together and do the steps and then go off. So we do recognize that there's some differences to be able to identify. I don't get it that you can't eat, that somebody eats and it sends them over the edge. I don't have any experience with that, so I'd be terrible. But drinking, oh yeah.
Yeah.
One drink leads to 2, leads to 10.
Exactly.
Right.
And then what was the aspect you said that the spiritual part got watered down over the years too? What do you feel like is the difference?
Okay. So what happened was the big book talks about your own conception of God, and it talks about as God as we understood him. All right. So the third step says, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And in We Agnostics, is a book chapter prior to the How It Works, they talk about using your own conception of God. And what has gotten confused on that is that people will say this, and I ask at retreats, I say, how many people in here think you can use the God of your own conception and he can be the one of your own understanding? And everybody raises their hand. I said, well, that's not what they did, and that's not what the book says. The book says if certain conditions exist, and we could look at it through We Agnostics, it talks about a person who's violently anti-religious, somebody who's been hurt by God, has no blah. It goes on and on for 2 paragraphs. Then it says, if that is you, start with your own conception if you need to, but it needs to be a supernatural power creator of the universe. It can't be a light bulb. They never give the opening for that, which somehow there is an opening. It was always something, and it was a start. It says as a start. So they never meant you to stay at your own conception. So neither do we. But there's an openness to start there. And that's one of the secret sauces for us, which I hope we can talk a little bit more about. Because that is a secret sauce, is how we manage that. Then step 3 says, we turned our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. It's the sentences in past tense. The guys are saying what they did. They turned their will and their life over to the care of God that they understood. So my sponsor said to me, if we want what they had, let's find out who their God was.
Yeah.
And they did understand a God. So that's where the confusion is. If you want what they have, the God they had was the God of the Bible. That's what they were using. Your own conception was meant for someone so broken or so unconnected, so lacking in a concept of God or any kind of concept at all, a place that they could start and seek and allow a relationship to build.
So Came to Believe relies much more on spirituality than the current program today.
Absolutely. So we do what they did. Because they did too.
Okay.
They did. So there's there's a lot of openness for someone to start from a lot of places, like we were just talking about. There's bias and prejudice against religious terms and religious, so we just try to dial people back, and that's our secret. Is that we put people at ease. That no, you don't have to go to a church. No, you don't have to read a doctrine. No, you don't have to do prayers. You don't have to do any of this stuff. That's not what this is. What you need to do is open yourself up to the possibility that there might be a creator or somebody that could help you. Could you get there? And that's the own conception element. All right, just get yourself to this place where you're open to something.
Yeah.
And let them connect to you. And then we move it along, and generally the connection then opens them up, and then we begin to talk about the God that the founders had, which was the God of the Bible. We just can't get around it, that's what they did.
Yeah.
So then everybody looks at me and goes, the whole program came from the Bible, The original guys were in the Oxford group, which was a first century Christian Bible study. They did the steps. They wrote the whole thing, everything underneath it. Before they wrote the book, everything they were doing, it's all underlined by the cardinal teachings of Jesus Christ. There, I said it. It's terrible. That'll turn everybody up too. The guy, had some pretty good teachings. And if you look at his basic teachings, nobody can have a big problem with it. Love everybody. Is that really a big problem for anybody, right?
Yeah, I think it's great.
So we go back to that. Now, I love my analogy of baseball. I always use baseball because I'm a Yankees fan. I hope everyone's a Yankees fan. You guys a Yankees fan?
No, Phillies.
We almost have to stop Phillies. But they are National League, so who cares?
Yeah.
What did they do this year? They got knocked out, though, right?
I don't follow it that much.
Yeah.
Like
Well, they were playing golf
yeah.
after the Yankees, but the Yankees were playing golf this year, too, pretty soon. That's a joke if you're a baseball fan, is when the season's over, they play golf. So who's playing golf first is the worst team.
Yeah.
But we played golf after the Red Sox, which is always good.
Yeah.
But I make this analogy, and this is you could use some other things, but I use baseball. So if you want to play baseball, they have a rule book, right? And you have to do a certain things to be successful at baseball. Bat and a ball, you have to do this. If you don't use the rule book, you won't be successful at it. I mean, could you use a football to play baseball? Try to hit the football? Well, maybe. But would it work? Would you have the success that they have, which is scoring runs? No. Same thing with this.
Yeah.
If you want what they had, do what they did. But here's the key. You don't have to do it. You don't have to play baseball if you don't want to. But if you're going to play, use the rule book. Why not try it? And we say the same thing. If you're going to try this, why not try it the way they did it?
Yeah.
There's a lot of openness. And what you've lost is a weekend. Well, I mean, how good is life going for you that stuck you in a retreat like ours for a weekend? Something's going wrong.
Yeah.
Right? So we do really, really encourage people to just leave what they've learned behind and just give it a shot. And if you do, what if what happened to those guys back in the 50s happens to you in the 30s? And the definition and the promises and this place that they said they were in and how they felt and how they were living works. Wouldn't you want that? And who could say no to that? And that's what we offer.
Yeah. I think it's incredible. I mean, it's definitely different than what everyone else is doing right now, which is a good thing, obviously, because you see such a high success rate where it's just not trending that way in other avenues right now. There is success, I think, in many different ways, but not the rate that you have at your program. And then you mentioned something earlier before we started filming about the difference between some addiction stems from mental illness and you believe that other addiction does not. Could you get into that a little bit more?
All right. So what science is catching up to the 12 steps today. And they're starting to validate that the change that happens, that the ability to be recovered, the ability to have a character change and a change in your behavior and an ability to be actually relieved from something that had you in bondage is neuroplasticity is backing all this. Saying if you go through this process, your brain actually rewires to a place where it is functioning in a less dysfunctional way. Now, we didn't know all of this back in the 30s and 40s. They were going through this process and realizing if you did these practices and continued to do them on a daily basis, you began to get better and heal. But now they're finding out that it's a real physiologic process that's going on.
Wow.
Now, science is also now backing the idea that we may be predisposed to be addicts, but not predetermined. You know, they've not found a gene that is directly related to addiction.
Wow.
It's not been identified.
That's
by the
interesting.
science. So it is not, you are not born to be an addict. And that should be great news for addicts and people. You don't have to be that way. In most cases, you have a genetic profile. Everybody has this set of genes in your environment, and things that happen to you in your childhood begin to turn the genes on and off to a certain way. It's called epigenetics. We could do a whole show on epigenetics. So that can then begin to predispose you. Now, you may have a set of genes that turned on or off predispose you to addiction. You may have a set of genes turned on or off that may not. But there's still no gene that says you're an addict or you're not an addict.
That's very interesting.
Very sciencey here.
Yeah.
But the trauma that we may go through in life, small t or big T, I went through small t trauma. I had a very sensitive temperament when I was younger. I had, and the way I was raised, my personality was woven to a place, and those things were turned on and off to a place for me that as soon as I took a drink, all things were good. Mm-hmm. So part of my recovery, being recovered, that the steps did for me was open my eyes to the fact that there were things, as I was healing in my 10, 11, and 12, the healing was, part of it was healing from the trauma of my childhood and things that happened. So, there's science, there's philosophy, I'm losing the word, but that's part of this. So when I had to start to recognize, why am I the way I am? Why do I act the way I am? Well, I had this trauma, little t, and I need to begin to change the way I see things and act on things. And it was a process of growth. So therapy, we say, is a big thing. We don't say that therapy is not good. Like 80% of people that go through our steps find themselves in some sort of therapy. There's great doctors and therapists out there that help with this process that still falls under 10, 11, and 12. It still falls under the process. So I had to heal from things that would be considered mental illness or mental trauma in order to become fully healthy and to grow and experience this, what we call fourth dimension of existence. So we're continuing to grow. Our 10th step says we're going to continue to grow in effectiveness and understanding. So it shows a growth process. The program opens up us to it. We open up to it. Therapists do. And that's also a confusion where people say, see, you're growing, continuing to grow, so you're always recovering. Like it doesn't make sense. Yeah. Because you're not going to have diabetes as long as you continue to eat, but you don't say you're recovering, right?
Yeah, it makes sense.
So I had to recognize those things, but until I went through the step process and got myself a roadmap, and then got myself freed and got myself connected to a power, which I did, which enabled me to get stronger, I wouldn't have seen these things, Maddie. I wouldn't have known to look at, why am I this way, and why is resentment, and why am I so fearful, and why do I have such impatience, and why am I think I'm not worth it? Well, it's, oh my gosh, it's my mother and father did this, and I was raised this way, and not their fault. It just happened. And I had to work my way through it.
Definitely.
So predisposed, yes. Predetermined, no. Work through your trauma, yes. And the steps can do it.
So do you think a lot of times alcoholics, recovered alcoholics, all of that, they have people in their family tree dating back, many other alcoholics. So do you think that's just generational trauma being passed down?
For sure.
And that is really what is making people dive into alcoholism rather than, because that's what I always thought, because there's a lot of alcoholism in my family. And I always thought it was just, oh, you're born with that. And then determining, or how your childhood really lays out determines whether you become one or you do not. But you're saying it's actually what happens in our childhood that leads us there. And there's nothing in our brain.
Predetermined.
Wow.
Right. So we can put forward, and I've read this. Gabor Mate wrote a book on the myth of normal. There's lots of research today now about the fact that when you're born under healthy emotional growth with a parent unit that's stable and functional, nobody might be an addict. It's a bold statement, but they say it may be that no one would be an addict.
Wow.
There's no reason that it would ever be.
Makes sense.
We, humanity, let's say, is on a timeline like this, where humanity, when there were families and all, up to today, only the last 50 or 60 years has there been such a break in the way the family unit is evolves, in the way a child is raised, in the way how much time they're spent with their parent and how there's parents. It's directly related to the increase in addiction and depression and suicide. I mean, it's spiked in the last 50 years. Mm-hmm. And they can see where, the family was much more involved. The parents were around the children much, much more. A baby was held more and more and more. There wasn't such societal pressure, economic pressure, this pressure that forces an identity on a human being that may or may not be their identity. Mm-hmm. And it's crushing our society.
Yeah.
It's crushing us.
Yeah. Yeah. You've definitely seen in the past, even since COVID, mental health, addiction, everything is at skyrocket rates. And I definitely believe, at least, that just because there's more fentanyl around or there's more drugs around, that doesn't necessarily mean more people are taking it. Something is happening in our society causing people to go that route. Nobody that is fully functioning, happy with their life, thriving, just says, oh, there's extra fentanyl on the streets, I'm going to go that route. It's obviously something very wrong that has continued to go wrong. And definitely the past 50 years, but I would say since COVID, it's gone astronomically uphill, where there's just more and more and more addiction. So that definitely is in line with what you said about it's not that we're born with it, it's what happens to us and how we respond to that. I
would be diagnosed, with ADHD, ADD. There's no blood test for it. Mm-hmm. These are just the only way that people know half of these mental illnesses are from symptoms. Mm-hmm. There's no blood test for it. And that was probably coded into me. Mm-hmm. And I may have had a susceptibility in a frontal lobe, again, not predetermined, but presupposed. So then you put a guy like me in a school, because this is what the schools are. You got to go to school. You got to learn this way. Mm-hmm. You got to be raised this way. You have to go to bed at 9 o'clock because the parents said go to bed at 9 o'clock, whether that's my human natured code for who Tom is as a being. We start to get pushed in boxes because that's what's going to make us successful in the culture we're in today. But that didn't work for me. Mm-hmm. I needed to be able to go to bed whenever I wanted. I needed to be able to do my homework at different times. I needed to be able to work in different, and that would have worked really well for me, but I was put in this box. So the stress of it and the lack of success because of it and my inability and frustration of being able to deal with any of this, being put in this box that I shouldn't have ever been put in. Then I take a drink. And all the pressure goes away. Phenomenon of craving hits. My frontal lobe loves that stimulation, and I'm off to the races. But this is all around. Think about all of us. If we want to be successful living in New York City, you have to make money. Yeah. Right? If you don't make money, if you're going to want to be creative and paint things or play guitar, which I'd love to do all day long, I'll be living on the street. So right away, decisions are off. A whole bunch of decisions that might be the best thing for you as a human being, as who you are off the table. Because you have to do something to make money. Yeah. Right? And you have to follow the school system because that's where you go to college and that's who hires and that's where the jobs are. See where this is all going. And it wasn't always this way. And it's very damaging to the culture today. It's putting us in this place that's going to, and what's happened? Suicide, addiction, depression. They have rates of depression today were unseen even 50 years ago. Yeah. And the food we eat, forget about it.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know that 80% of what you find on your grocery store shelf wasn't there 100 years ago? It didn't exist.
And it's really only in the United States that the food is so poor quality as well, which is not great. How do you shop certain places? Like, how do you avoid it, if at all?
Oh, totally. I avoid. I try to eat no sugar at all and very little carbs. I do more a modified kind of carnivore thing. There's debate of whether you'd want to be vegetarian. Some say that's good, but I go that route. I eat nothing processed as best I can. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Because you go into Whole Foods, you go into the stores. This is why we're set up for failure. You see this whole thing where the culture, we're set up because we have to live in New York City. You have to make money. You have to buy food, but I can't go grow my own food and we can't. It's off the table. Really. Yeah. I have to make healthy choices, vegetables, meats, eggs, and I stay away from all refined sugar, almost none. So I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah.
But it takes an effort.
Yeah. There was something else I thought was interesting, the ADHD being coded in you. Do you feel like ADHD, OCD, all of these illnesses are wired into us growing up as well, that these are not things that we're born with?
I think they're wired in. I'm not a neuroscientist, so haven't done the research myself, but the stuff I'm reading all indicates, yes, you're not born with it.
Very interesting.
You may be born with a set of genes that turned on one way or the other would lead you to it, but you're not born directly with it.
Yeah.
And it's a thing. I spoke with a neuroscientist at Yale who's working with us on addiction and we're in discussions with him. We'd love to be working with him more. We'd love Yale to do a grant study on why Came to Believe works so well.
Yeah.
Why the program, because it would be a great parallel to what science is saying. But they're just finding that there are some things in brains and mental illness that are like what you would call an abnormality. Like if you're born with 4 fingers or something, you're born with 4 fingers. You're born with things in the brain you're born that way.
Yeah.
But many of these things, they weren't. They're finding now there were solutions to them at the beginning. And ADHD is one of them, they're saying. OCD, all of that, under the right circumstances, there are scientists that are postulating that they don't have to exist.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense because in different countries, the rates are not as high as here.
Yeah.
And if you look around the world, there's going to be certain countries with much higher depression, much higher OCD, much higher anxiety, and there are ones without. So if it was something that we were born with, then this wouldn't be the case.
Right.
So it has to be based on environment, based on the way we're growing up, based on early childhood, because if not, you would see very similar statistics across the board for every country around the globe.
Same thing with obesity factors, that you don't see them as high as they are here in the United States. It's directly,
100%.
when I went to high school in the 70s and grade school, there was 1 or 2 overweight kids. Now it's 30%.
Yeah.
Or 40% are overweight. The United States is the worst, actually.
Yeah.
There's some of the foods that we have that are on our shelves that are banned in the UK. In the EU have banned
I've seen
things.
a lot of that in different places in Europe.
Banned. So there's a statement I'll make that some scientists and some people think is probably relatively valid, that the most addictive substance on earth is sugar.
I've heard that.
Now, we have companies in the United States that are taking advantage of that.
Yeah.
And they have neuromarketers. So they have people behind their scenes, departments of neuromarketing, designing the most addictive kind of food they can. The right sugar, fat, and salt content that would addict you and get you connected.
It's disturbing. But obviously it makes sense because a corporation is set up to make money. How do you make money? Having something addictive. If the cigarette companies do great, it's addictive. And now that people are starting to wean off of those and realize things that are blatantly unhealthy, now they're sneaking it into the food. How do we make money off food? How do we get people sick? How do we get big pharma to start profiting. It's all a cycle
It's all
of
a
the
cycle.
economy.
It's all about money. How much money do they need?
Aside from what's in our food, I've even seen things like yogurt in our country is packaged in plastic that seeps into it. That's causing cancer. In France, they have that exact same yogurt. It's in a glass container. It's banned to sell in what we're consuming. So it really is scary
Phthalates.
what it is being
Phthalates,
put into.
which leaches out of all that.
Wow.
And these phthalates is what messes with our genetics.
Yeah.
Code, I mean, men's reproductive rate or something is cut in half because of phthalates, they say, like sperm counts and modalities and the chances of child. I mean, it's, if you read into it, you'd be scared to death
Yeah.
to eat anything that they make today. They don't care. And here's a good statement that is made in one of the books I read. It's, they're not trying to kill you, the food companies. They just don't care if you get killed.
Yeah.
They just don't care if they're killing you.
Wow.
All for the magic dollar.
Yeah.
And
Makes sense.
America, I know.
Yeah.
And we're down at the bottom of the ladder.
Yeah.
But, if we do shows like this, if we have conversations like this go on all over more and more, and people understand that there are some choices and you can do some things about it, especially about addiction. Addiction can be addressed. We should do it.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy. I feel like this conversation is so logical, but they're in society today, you shouldn't be having these conversations. Like, it's shunned that you shouldn't be talking about the overeating problem. You shouldn't be talking about the fact that the obesity rates are skyrocketing. The addiction rates are at an all-time high, that maybe like the I forget what they're called, where they're giving out extra supplies. Maybe that's not the best method. Maybe it is. I have no idea. But that you just shouldn't question anything is the scary part. That there's a lot shown to us that we should not be questioning things. We should not be asking what's in our food, and that we shouldn't be asking why obesity is at an all-time high, or any of this, which is the scary part, because if you don't talk about it, if you don't question it, how are you ever going to find a solution?
And there's we actually have the power of the people to make the changes. Think about this. It's all supply and demand. They all just want to make a lot of money. And as soon as they're not making money on whatever it is, they'll change. Yeah. Just like that. How do you lower gas prices? Stop buying gas. The gas prices go down in 2 seconds. If when the gas price was up around $4 or something, remember a year ago, it's not so bad now, but it went way up after COVID. I was just, and the oil companies were saying, we need this. Then you see they had record profits. They were gouging us off of a notion that there was some sort of shortage of oil. There isn't any shortage of oil anywhere. We're all like subject to what they tell us. So wait a minute, you're making record profits. So what was the problem? Like what I don't understand how you off us. I wanted everyone to stay home for a week. Stay home for a week and buy no gas. The gas would have come down. Same thing with all these sugary, terrible foods. If we got together and more people just wouldn't buy them, they would go away. So we have more power than we think, but it would take us all to get together. Yeah. Or vote the people in to our government that will make these changes. Yeah. We are a republic, and a republic says we have representatives. We're not really a democracy. We're a republic. Yeah. Because we don't have a direct vote on things. We have a direct vote on the people that have a direct vote. Right? But we could make changes. People say, what can one man do? What can just a few people do? When in fact, it's only been a few people that have ever made the great changes. Yeah. Well, I think the mental health industry, or I don't know, in community, there's two sides today. I think there's the side where people are searching for wellness and trying to get better. And then there's this other mental health counterpart where I think people are pushing accept everything, accept that
you are struggling with ADHD. Accept that you are overeating. Accept, and just love yourself as you are. And I think that you should be loving yourself enough to make the changes, to implement healthy strategies, to try to better yourself. Because if you're not trying to make the change, that's not really mental health. It's not mental health to know that something is wrong and not try to fix it, change it, grow upon it. You could have nothing wrong with you. You still should be trying to grow as a person. But I think it's very damaging to have in our society right now self-acceptance without the need or will to grow. Like, you can love yourself as you are at your worst, I think is extremely important. But then what are you going to do about it to get yourself better?
You touched on a really controversial and touchy subject with the body shaming and the things where that's a woke thing, I think they call it, right?
Yeah.
Where you're supposed to be, everything's just okay.
Yeah.
And, everything's just not okay.
Yeah.
So
100%.
I'm on that. I mean, if you're 40 pounds overweight, there's health risks to that. There's all kind of things. You're affecting the economy, your family, their people, yourself. You're not your best self. You don't feel good about yourself. Even if you say you do, you don't.
Yeah.
It's a common. There's no way you look in the mirror and think it, but you've accepted it somehow.
Yeah.
And for us to be saying, yep, just accept it. You're good.
Yeah.
Or to say, we know it might not be easy. We're not telling you could solve it overnight, but we're going to come alongside you and let's make some solutions because you'll be better.
Yeah.
At everything. The things you want in life, you'll get. I say to people when we start this recovery process, I'll say to them, what is it that you guys really want when we come in here? Do you want to be off the drugs and the alcohol? Yes. But what you really want is a happy, successful life. You want to be able to function. You want to be able to come and go. You want to be able to travel, right? And
Yeah.
people say, well, yeah. I said, we got to do something about it. And it's a holistic thing. We're going to take you through the 12 steps. We're going to get you started. We're going to launch you on 10, 11, and 12, but it's going to bleed into mental health. It's going to bleed into your fitness and your nutrition and your spiritual life and relationships, and everything can be touched and gotten better. And the result of that would be you being your best self, whatever we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
I used to train people. In a previous life, I was in the fitness industry for 20 years. And many men and women would come in and tell me what they wanted to look like, right? Especially women. Picture in a magazine. I want her arms. I want her. And I'd say, well, I need her parents. You don't have her parents. So I'd say this. How about this? If I train you and make you the fittest, strongest, healthiest you can be, wouldn't that have to be your best look? Well, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
If we could get everybody thinking about that in all the aspects of their life, what's your best you? And don't worry about what everything else is. How much better of a place would it be? And then whatever that special talent, ability, which you bring into the world, we need that to better society. We need everyone looking towards those kind of things. Social media's got us all. We need to be this. We need to be that. We're not good enough if we're not this, if we're not that. It's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm very vocal on this as well. I've struggled with eating disorders when I was in addiction too. And if I just accepted that, I would be dead today.
Yeah.
Like, I would not be here. And I know that is the route that I was going. And it's no different with overeating is an eating disorder. Undereating is an eating disorder. Restriction, bulimia, it's all an eating disorder. But there's just too much out there right now about self-love without wanting to change or better yourself or grow. You can have both at the same time. And I think that's what we should definitely be pushing, and absolutely take away the judgment. If someone does have a problem with addiction, overeating, undereating, whatever it is, that we shouldn't judge them. We should help them get to a place that they are comfortable with themselves, but absolutely not just accept what we have, whether it be depression, anxiety, whatever it is, just to continue to try to get better and get out of it. Like, I definitely get anxious quite often, and if I did not work on that, it would be crippling. Like, how do you get better from it? I used to have a problem where in like a challenging situations, speaking to people or interviewing, I used to get nervous. Now that's one of my strongest suits because I worked on it, and I used the fear I felt about it to realize, well, why am I so fearful? Because I care a lot. So that's one step. That's good. And how do I get better at it? And I just think that could definitely benefit our society as a whole if we're all trying to get better. And I still need to get a lot better on a lot of things, but I love myself right now, and that's okay to know both at the same time.
You know what they say? It's not what you know that hurts you. Oh, no, it's not what you don't know that hurts you. It's what you know that's not true that hurts you. So fear is a lie.
Yeah.
Somehow we've been taught that fear, and it controls us. It's a huge subject, and why we do or don't do whatever because we're afraid of some sort of reaction or some sort of, and it's all, again, been programmed into us and pushed into us by the environment that we were brought up in. And it's not so easy to break when your entire worldview and everything you know up to 16, 17, 18 years old reinforced the fact that if I do this, this may happen. The fear is coded in you. Somewhere it was coded in you, probably.
Yeah, 100%.
If we looked, right?
Yeah.
This anxiety. And at some point you have to say, wait a minute, that was a lie. Yeah. Not so easy to just turn off. But now that lie is today, that's a lie. I am going to not be fearful today. I'm going to turn that fear over because I'm a strong, competent, capable woman with a voice, and I can say it. And then when you do it once or twice and nothing happens, like bad.
Yes, yeah, that's huge.
Right?
Yeah.
Then you go, oh, wait, whoa.
Yeah.
Maybe I can have a voice.
Yeah.
But
or
it's really
even
that you say that.
Try it, mess up, and realize the world didn't end.
The
I'm
world
still
didn't
here.
end. Right.
Exactly.
I love anxiety and fear about situations, and there's two ways to do it, right? Let's say there's a terrible situation that might happen tomorrow, and you're scared to death about it, right? This thing might happen. It's not going to happen until tomorrow. So we have a choice. We can be anxious, miserable, and nervous about it and have the same thing happen. Or we can be not anxious, nervous about it and have the same thing happen. Which choice are you going to make today, right? And I try to make that other choice every day. Tomorrow, is there anything I can do about it? Then I ought to be. If I've done everything I can do about it, let it go.
Yeah.
And then walk through whatever happens, walk through these consequences. Life skills. And we were not brought up with them. We were not coded with them correctly to handle this. And a program like this would work for anybody. I am encouraging you to come. We're going to get you to come to the next retreat. Yeah. We'll make sure. I wish we could have got you to Malibu. You should have. You know, one of the guys from the mocktail hour, one of the guys from that mocktail hour came to Malibu, and he works in the addiction recovery in Battery Park.
Okay.
Kashif, I don't know if you met him. He was there. He came. He's off his chart, going around the city telling everybody about what we do, saying, you at least need to know about this.
Yeah.
Right? Which sets us on a path of not just off addiction, but all these things we're talking about. All this stuff about healing from all the things in our lives. This is a great first step and last step for some. We want it everywhere. Yeah. At least the option. Yeah. So that people know. Because what I hear all the time is, why didn't anybody ever tell me about this? And we go.
That's what I thought right away. Because whenever something seems really challenging or different, to me, I'm always wondering, okay, why? What are they doing? And why haven't I heard about it? And that to me makes me want to do it more, honestly. But I think that anyone can gain life skills from programs like this. Like, I even think my friends that don't have problems with alcohol, I just think that everybody should be trying to better themselves in some capacity, and all encompassing your fitness, your nutrition, your addictions. Like, not all addictions are as blatant as alcoholism or drug addiction. There's other addictions that we don't even realize right now. The phone is huge. Phone addiction, I think. I'm the younger generation. I think it's going to be quite scary what we see coming out of their generation with the phone addiction. I mean, I'm on my phone too much. I know that, but kids that are just latched onto it from such a young age, I mean, that definitely is affecting their coding system. So I think people don't even realize the addictions that they might have every day that are intertwined in their life, and I think that anyone could.
They were born with
gain.
it. They don't know any different. They look at their phone.
Yeah.
How did they do anything? They don't know how to type. They don't know how to do things. They don't
Yeah.
know that's all they had was a phone. It's really hurting us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what do you think if you read 200 books a year?
Mm-hmm.
Don't you think? You know, all academics and people say you're better, more articulate, smarter, better thinker. It
Yes.
helps your brain function. Reading is really good for you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you read 200 books a year, what do most people say if you say we want you to read 200 books a year? What do they say?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I have no time.
It's too hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I have no time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So they figure that reading 200 books a year would take like 500 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Most people spend 2,700 hours. No, 750 hours on their phones.
Wow.
So just cut a third of your phone time out
Yeah.
and you could read 200 books.
Yeah.
And they say that people spend 2,700 minutes a day on television.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's a year, whatever. It's just a huge amount, 2,700 hours a year watching television.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that we don't have the time. It's about managing the way we use our time.
Yeah.
There's time. 200 books, it's doable.
Yeah.
And it would make us smarter. And that's like what you were saying, these things that are damaging us. We call it brokenness or dysfunction. So you're not addicted
Yeah.
classically to a substance that's damaging your life. But you're living in a brokenness, you're living in a dysfunction that is affecting your life in a profound way, differentently. Anxiety, phone, what is it hurting me? And how can we address that by just going through a process? First of all, you have to recognize that it's a problem, because you'll never do anything that you don't think is a problem.
Yeah.
As soon as you see that there's a problem to it, there's a process. And we think absolutely this can have an effect on that. More people need to just realize they're in it. We're born into this society. We eat all this food. We do this stuff, and we just think, well, what can I do about it? Well, we can do a lot about it. And no, we shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
Right? We shouldn't be. You shouldn't be under the stress and anxiety that you're under. Why? Because you're in New York City, and we have to go every minute. Because if we sit down, you're lazy.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's extremely promising.
We're working on Sunday.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
But this is good.
True. Yeah.
And people are like, what are you doing? I said, no, we go.
Yeah, honestly, I'm going a lot. But I think it's quite promising, the whole notion of we are not born this way. We
Right.
are not born
It's a freedom.
anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And that we have control to take back our lives from any addiction, any substance, anything that is damaging us, any brain pattern that has been wired into us. We have the power to take back our own lives. And being born this way is not an excuse any longer. And I think when you wake yourself up from that is when the real happiness starts, and when you can start experiencing success and growth and grow from there.
It's nearly a mic drop, Maddie. So it's true. Whatever you have that's got you in bondage or brokenness, there's something that can be done. Science is backing us today. Psychology is backing us today. And our program backs us. It, the ability that you can be relieved. Find something, guys. Whatever it is. It's a matter of looking out there. Today there's solutions, and they're getting more and more and more solutions for this stuff. There's things we can do. So reach out to us, came2recovery.org. We'd love to talk to anybody, help you come to the next retreat. We have a virtual retreat in a few weeks coming. It works over the internet. And then we have retreats throughout the country and in the UK. And we're bringing them into New York City in May. We're going to be in Kips Bay. We're going to have another mocktail hour. I hope you come.
Yeah, I'll be there.
And we want to be in the sober community and let everybody know that you don't have to stay this way. You can be relieved.
So when is your next one, your next in-person retreat? Is that Kips Bay?
The next in-person retreat in the New York area is in Kips Bay in April.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
We're going to have a virtual retreat in January 5th through the 7th. Mm-hmm. We have some leaders right now who only went through the virtual retreat, who are living recovered, happy, joyous, and free lives. Mm-hmm. And all they did was go through virtual. So it's something to do. People that can't get out of their house, that have no money, have little kids, have disabilities. This is a savior for them, a miracle that they couldn't come.
Yeah.
And then we have a few retreats in California in March, and we're going to be in Portland in March, California in February, and then what I'm hoping is to do them, fairly regularly in New York City once we get a hold here, like monthly.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I can't wait to go myself. Thank you so much for coming on and spreading the message. I'm very excited to come. I'm going to try to bring friends. I'm going to try to get everyone into this. Thank you so much for coming on and getting real.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in and getting real with us. Podcast will be posted every other Wednesday on Spotify and YouTube. Please reach out via DM if you want to chat.